Hello everybody and welcome to Parks Bros. It's Drew here, and today is the day that I know a lot of you have been waiting for. We're going to take an up-close look at Busch Gardens Tampa's newest roller coaster and give our full in-depth review and thoughts on Iron Gwazi. Iron Gwazi is the newest roller coaster going into Busch Gardens Tampa, located in Tampa, Florida, of course, and has an official opening date of March 11th, 2022. While yes, it is not technically opened to the public as a whole yet, I was thankfully invited to the media day previews for the coaster. Huge thanks goes out to Busch Gardens Tampa, of course, for allowing us to come, and the ride is currently in pass holder previews. Now, let's move on to some history. This was constructed by Rocky Mountain Construction, also known as RMC. And this company specializes in taking old wooden coasters and revamping them in a brand new way. They put steel track and even in this case supports onto old existing wooden coasters to give them new life, and in some cases make them completely different where they aren't even recognizable to what they were before. Iron Gwazi is a perfect example of that, as the original Gwazi, which operated from 1999 to 2015, was a dueling wooden coaster. That means there were two separate coasters that raced each other, and as Iron Gwazi rose from the ashes of those old coasters, it is nearly twice the height and only one coaster, but may I say, it is way more impressive, at least to look at. Also, I'm sure it's a lot smoother than the experience that it had prior with the original Gwazi. Moving into some of the stats of this roller coaster, as Iron Gwazi is North America's tallest hybrid coaster, of course, meaning steel track, wooden supports, bolstering a height of 206 feet with the tallest drop on a hybrid coaster at 206 feet as well. But Iron Gwazi is also the steepest hybrid coaster in the world with a 91-degree drop. That's right, it goes beyond vertical. And the fastest hybrid coaster in the world with a top speed of 76 miles an hour. And boy, do you feel it. When it comes to track length, though, there's no records here, but it does have quite a long track length at 4,075 feet, creating a ride duration station to station of 1 minute and 50 seconds, and of course, from the drop to the brake run, about a 50-second ride time. To wrap all these stats up, we got to go over the three inversions, the first of which is called a 540-degree roll, or as we've kind of come to call it as a nickname, the death roll, harkening back to the move that crocodilian species use when they try and disorient their prey. Following this is an overbank turn, or you could even argue that it's a cutback, and the final of these three inversions is a 0G stall. So after covering all our bases on the stats, let's figure out how to get there. Once you enter into Busch Gardens Tampa and go through those turn styles, make sure to make that little bit of a right turn through some of those gift shops, and you'll be greeted with the main restaurant at the front of the park. Now, at that point, you're going to take a left-hand turn and just follow the main pathway, and Iron Gwazi will be the first ride you come across, and realistically, the first thing that you come across in the park on that entire side. Talk about an easy star attraction to get to. Once you get to the coaster after your short walk, you will notice that there is a giant canopy or entryway greeting you into the ride, but this is not where the queue starts. You will see a wait time, of course, at that point, but before you actually get into the queue itself, there will be a test seat located on the right-hand side, as well as a couple of posters showing off the wildlife initiatives that this ride has. And we'll talk about that a little bit more after we get off the ride. Right next to those posters, though, will be the quick queue machine, so if you want to skip the wait, if it's a little too long for your liking, you can purchase a quick queue there. And this is the point where you're going to need to go to a locker and purchase a locker if you have any items on you that are bigger than like a wallet or a phone. So if you have backpacks, purses, maybe even water bottles, this is going to be a must stop if you want to ride the attraction. From this point, you can enter into the quick queue, which will take you right up this station and even over a little staircase before you get onto your ride. And the main queue will start underneath the station itself with plenty of switchbacks and eventually a spiraling walkway that goes right above the ride's track, creating a spectacular view of both the first turn of the coaster as well as that first lift hill, which I gotta say, from this point, especially in line, it looks massive. Something cool about this queue though is they do have plenty of posters all around it giving you fun facts about crocodilian species, even facing alligators against crocodiles, and even the differences between the original Gwazi and Iron Gwazi, which I think is a really cool nod to what this coaster started as. Once you get into the station building itself, there will be more switchbacks that will greet you before you get into one of 12 rows and take your seat on this wild ride. Once you take your seat, you'll notice that this is like plenty of other RMC trains. So if you've been on other rides like Twisted Colossus at Magic Mountain, or maybe Twisted Cyclone at Six Flags Over Georgia, and of course Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point, you kind of know what these restraints and seats will feel like. The first thing you'll notice is that the back is quite wide and pretty comfortable in terms of getting you a lot of space. I can't lie though, it does feel maybe a little claustrophobic to some people as you are enclosed on 3 sides, but for me, this is incredibly comfortable. Now, when it comes to the restraint, make sure you buckle up your seatbelt before you pull down your restraint, and this is where it might get a little tighter for some taller or larger guests. This restraint is just a lap bar as well as a shin guard, so don't be expecting any over-the-shoulder restraints at all, and this is great if you want a more free-feeling experience. It feels like the top half of your body is completely in the open, which I love. But I do have to mention, for some taller and larger guests, this restraint is quite uncomfortable and can be really tight on both your shins as well as your waist. So do try the test seat before you attempt getting into line for Iron Gwazi for sure. But for me, at 6 foot tall and pretty skinny, I have no problems at all with this restraint. And actually, I have to say, the RMC trains, for me, are some of the most comfortable roller coaster trains out there. But with all that said, let's get going on Iron Gwazi. The ride experience will start with a quick left-hand turn, which rolls you out of the station before encountering a little bit of a straightaway, which will hit you at drive tires, which speed you up just a bit more. Now, in the front row, you'll be dipping down to the left underneath where the queue is to officially reach the lift hill. And this doesn't feel weird at all. It just feels like you're turning and dropping just a tiny bit. Whereas in the back row, you're kind of getting flung. You get a bit of air time pushing you out of your seat, actually, and some lateral forces pushing you side to side. It is a lot more intense in the back row, and that is something I will bring up a lot during this review. Immediately following that, you'll be headed up that 206 foot tall lift hill at a 45-degree angle, which is quite steep, I won't lie. But to me, this lift hill gives some of the best views of Busch Gardens Tampa as well as the surrounding area. On your left-hand side, you'll get a fantastic view of the wave turn, which is such a special element on this ride. We'll talk about it more later when we get to it. And on the right-hand side, though, you'll get fantastic views of the safari section of the park and even Montu, Cobra's Curse, and Cheetah Hunt especially. Although Iron Gwazi is themed to a crocodile, it definitely gives you a bird's eye view of the park, and I gotta say, it really is remarkable. Once you start to crest that lift hill, however, this is where you'll get a view of Shikra in front of you, as well as Falcon's Fury and the rest of the park, which is really beautiful in itself. And if you're in the front, you'll actually have some time to think about that and really take it in, because you kind of hang there for a good 5 or 6 seconds before you plummet down that beyond vertical drop, where in the back you get thrown over the hill at a pace that is rarely seen. In the front, it almost feels like a dive coaster, almost like Shikra with how slow you crest over that hill. But believe me, the ejector airtime, which just throws you up into your restraint is present on every single row of the train, and I think a big part of that is because the drop is truly beyond vertical. So even in the front row, you'll be getting some really good air time, but man, in the back, this legitimately might be one of the most intense drops on a coaster I have ever experienced. It seriously feels like it's trying to rip you up into that restraint as hard as possible, and it got me screaming and hollering every single time I rode this coaster. Outside of the amazing airtime you get from that beyond vertical drop, you'll also twist to the right just a tiny bit as some of the supports from later on in the ride feel like they're gonna hit you right in the hand if you have your hands up in the air. This is also adding into that first drop in a way I did not expect, as it gives you even more thrills than I could have ever imagined. As you're twisting right and going right under that support structure though, this is where I will mention on the left hand side will be your on-ride photo. So if you're crying, if you're smiling, make sure to pose while you're there so you can pick up, of course, an on-ride photo after you're done with Gwazi. But let's just say your ride is just beginning, as you'll start to feel some insane positive G-forces that push you back down into your seat and actually made me gray out on every single ride, meaning that I started to have a little bit of blurry vision as the blood would rush away from my head and down to my feet. It is insane to add that all in with the first drop. I mean, realistically, this is one element of the ride, and I've already talked about it for how long? Like over a minute. It is that good. Following this is a twisted outer bank airtime hill, meaning you bank outwards, which is not exactly what you would expect on a coaster, but it gives you some fantastic airtime as you crest that hill. Going up into it, though, you get another awesome hand chopper moment as some of those supports kind of envelop you as you head up that turn. But as you get to the top, you will twist outward in a really cool moment of lateral forces pushing you to the right side, as well as extreme airtime pushing you out of your seat. This is a fantastic moment of the ride, but I will say, as fantastic as it is, it does get kind of overshadowed, I feel, compared to the rest of the ride's elements, which I am completely flabbergasted by. Following this, you twist back left and down underneath some more structure, another gray out moment potentially on the ride. This wasn't a for sure for me, but on a couple rides, especially towards the back row, man, oh man, I was feeling it by this point. Add that in with some more hand choppers, of course, and some crazy lateral forces. You'll start to twist up to the right again in one of the most graceful moments of any RMC I can think of, especially when you're hitting that top speed of 76 miles an hour like you are. And as you reach the apex of this turn, you will encounter that 540-degree barrel roll down drop, or as we like to call it, the death roll. This inversion spins downward to the left as you enter this element, twisted to the right, which creates this insane moment of lateral forces. This is something that the ride does incredibly well, pushing you side to side, but man, this is the element that you feel it the most. As you're twisting down in the front row, I gotta say, this is almost graceful in the way that it maneuvers. I really love to especially see it off-ride, and on-ride looking backwards is just phenomenal. Spiraling like that towards the ground is unlike any other element that I can think of that I've personally been able to experience thus far, but the laterals are the most prominent part of this inversion, and I gotta say, it's even more prominent in the back. In the back especially though, this element is just insane as it feels like it's trying to fling you out of the train again. And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure how to describe this moment other than kind of a better zero-G roll, as at least in my experiences on Iron Gwazi, it wasn't trying to give you insane airtime or positive forces, but the laterals twisting all the way around were really great in itself. I know a lot of people were comparing this to the Mosasaurus roll of Velocicoaster at Universal in Orlando, and I gotta say, I can't really compare the two. They give completely different experiences, as the Mosasaurus roll feels more like an airtime moment, where the death roll feels more like a 0G moment, if that makes any sense. Let me know down in the comments though which you prefer. I'd be very interested to see. Following this though is a cool little left-hand turn into the overbank turn, which as you head in is super graceful and almost feels like you're doing some crazy maneuvers in a fighter jet. It's awesome. This is also a cool moment of positive G-forces kind of pushing you into your seat, and I gotta say, after riding it, I can definitely argue that this is indeed an inversion, as you do feel like you're upside down cutting that way, but your mind gets dragged elsewhere as you exit that element because there is insane whip that flips you to the right real quick, especially towards the back. It caught me off guard every ride, and I gotta say, this combined with the next element right after is my favorite combo element of the ride. You'll start heading upward again as you try and go over the station as well as the brake run and flip to the right incredibly quick. This is realistically the most powerful airtime moment of the ride, and you are flipped 90 degrees to the right, completely sideways. This wave turn element is really unlike any other wave turn that I've experienced thus far, and the element is realistically just an airtime hill flipped to the side. But having that moment of whip to the right again with extreme ejector airtime pushing you out of your seat as far as you would think humanly possible, and then twisting as quick as possible toward the left-hand side as this element finishes right underneath the lift hill, which gives you a hand chopper. This, I gotta say, is by far my favorite moment of this coaster. It is just crazy. I mean, you can see my on-ride reaction every time. It was taking me by surprise how powerful that good 2 seconds was in the entirety of the ride duration. Following this though, you're gonna dive underneath that lift hill and pop up into a little bit of airtime, which I will say I prefer these moments in the front a little bit more, as they give you more of an extreme weight lift as compared to maybe an elongated version of that toward the back. Following that little bit of airtime, you'll be twisted to the left again for a smaller version of a wave turn, which gives you, of course, some really nice airtime, especially towards the front. And then you will encounter the final inversion of the ride, that 0G stall, as you twist upside down, just hanging there for a good 2 or 3 seconds. Now, I can't lie, I think this is probably my least favorite part of the ride, which is a complete shock to me. The 0G stall on so many other coasters, it's legitimately one of my favorite inversions of all time, but I think it goes to show how incredible every part of this ride has been so far. The fact that a 0G stall, a freaking 0G stall, is my least favorite part of the ride just goes to show how amazing Iron Gwazi really is. Don't get me wrong though, this element is still fantastic as you get a bit of that weightless feeling, but completely upside down. The best part of it though is when you turn out of it, as you get another crazy lateral moment of forces, just like many other all over this ride's layout. Soon after this, you'll get a little bit of a pop of airtime, which I gotta say, I do prefer probably in the front a bit more, and a right-handed turn into kind of a double up / double down. It's realistically a combo of 2 little airtime hills that cross over where the layout went prior, and I gotta say, toward the front and even in the back, the first of these gives you some pretty ridiculous lateral moments as well as a sharp pop of airtime. This caught me off guard in the best way possible, and I even started saying it was a bit violent in comparison to what you would think it would be. While that first little airtime hill really excels at lateral forces, the second one excels at airtime. Gives you a great moment of that weightless feeling, and of course you'll dive toward the right, experiencing a 180-degree turn to one of the coolest moments of the ride, I gotta say, as you get vaulted into this floater airtime hill that sometimes ends up being more powerful than expected as you go all the way back towards the ground and twist to the left in a very sharp way. This all while going underneath some of the track portions you just traversed prior, giving you another fantastic hand chopper moment. But I gotta say, it is almost a perfect finale. You still feel that speed all the way into the brake run, and I gotta say that brake run has to work hard to slow you down. I mean, talk about ending on a high note. As you've made it into the brake run and are probably questioning what the heck just happened, you'll slowly turn left into the maintenance shed and even see an Easter egg towards the old Gwazi once or twice before making a little bit of a right turn back into the station. Following this, you'll head down a little staircase back to where the lockers are, grab your things, and walk out the exit pathway past your ride photos, where you'll probably see yourself either losing it in a good way or potentially a bad way, and then be greeted by the gift shop. At this gift shop, they have tons of Iron Gwazi and even Gwazi themed merch. Just to let you know, if you purchase anything from the gift shop, 5% of your purchase will be donated to Wilderness Foundation Africa, which is a cool initiative that has plenty of conservation efforts towards lions, rhinos, and many more animals across Africa, and is helping to sustain their habitats. But there you have it. Your Iron Gwazi experience is officially over. Alrighty, it's time for my personal thoughts and feelings on Iron Gwazi. Let's go over a couple of the bases. Iron Gwazi is seriously a phenom at Busch Gardens Tampa. Don't get me wrong, this park was already stacked with fantastic coasters, but it was kind of missing a star attraction. Well, guess what? It's finally got that in Iron Gwazi. This thing is just absurd in all the best ways. It was leaving me speechless time and time again as I went through the ride's layout, only muttering the same 4 or 5 words. If you watched my media day video, I repeated them a lot. Insane, absurd, amazing, incredible. Those were the only words I could use to describe this ride. I thought maybe that was a snap judgment. Maybe it's just because I just wrote it. Well, the days following, those are realistically still the only words that come to mind. I am still taken aback after riding that thing 5 times and realistically having a tough time explaining how much I loved the ride experience. There is really no point of slowing down on this entire roller coaster. Every element feels back to back. It is pretty insane that there's realistically no gap. At least it feels like there's no gap between elements. Sure, obviously there are little spacers between like the wave turn and the airtime hills, or the 0G stall and the airtime hills, but they don't feel like that because of the speed you have still, as well as some of the whip you feel back and forth, and plenty of other reasons throughout the ride's layout. From the first drop all the way to the brakes, I can't help but smile the entire time, and it was like that even after my first ride in the very front row. There are literally only maybe 3 or 4 coasters that I've ever been on that I can definitely say that, and all of them are in my top 5. And I think multiple people can attest, after my first ride, I was physically shaking for a good 3 or 4 minutes afterward. Like, there are only a couple of rides I can remember ever doing that with. One of them's Outlaw Run, one of them's Maverick. I mean, let's just say Iron Gwazi is in pretty incredible company already. And to keep this review from going on for like 15 more minutes of me just going, oh my gosh, this is amazing, this is cool, this is crazy, let's just say I can't really find anything to complain about. Even with going in the nitpicking route, there's not really anything that I can personally go, oh, I wish they changed that. Maybe theming, I guess? But let's be real, when you're going 76 miles an hour, you're not going to be paying attention to that. The intensity of this ride is just really uncommon with RMCs and hybrid coasters as a whole, which really took me by surprise. And yes, this thing has plenty of airtime, as you'd probably expect, but an immense amount of lateral forces and positive G forces that were completely unexpected, at least on my side of things. It really does deliver the full package in terms of variability of ride elements as well as forces, and I gotta say, it is literally as near to perfect as a layout could be. So, saying all that, let's get to my least and most favorite parts of different parts of the ride. For seat, I gotta say, I probably prefer the back row, but the front is also very stellar. And to be completely honest, you can't go wrong in the middle either. I mean, some of the later rides I was having, the middle was starting to feel like the back. So I can only imagine what a back row night ride would feel like. Whew, man, I think we all know where that would rank automatically at that point. But there's not really a bad seat on this ride, and there's maybe only 2 or 3 other coasters I could really say that about. Well, how about favorite and least favorite element on the ride? I gotta say favorite easily, that wave turn. I love how that feels, just being vaulted out of your seat with a cool hand chopper and just some crazy lateral motion. That is incredibly fun every time. Now, least favorite's probably that zero G stall, as I mentioned earlier, which is kind of insane to think about, but that's still a fun moment nonetheless. Now, something I did want to talk about though is my biggest surprise as well as potentially my biggest letdown. And I gotta say, biggest surprise, starting on a high note, was the last airtime hills at the very end of the ride. Looking at them from off-ride, they look like they have nothing, like no airtime. They're kind of slow, whatever, they're small, blah, blah, blah. But I gotta say, on ride, super fun moment. They keep that ride going all the way to the brake run, even though when it seems like the ride should be over already. The biggest letdown, I gotta say, is probably that death roll. I hate to say it, but me being me, I looked at some reviews prior to riding from some of the employees, and they were saying it's the best moment on any coaster ever. Well, I don't necessarily agree with that, but it is definitely a freaking good moment, that's for sure. And to be honest, that's the only thing I could really think of as potentially a letdown. Let's be real, it still was not one of those. With all of that said, let's get into my ratings, which are a little unorthodox compared to others, as I do have a ski slope rating pretty much recommending what type of rider you should be before taking on Iron Gwazi, a 5-star rating out of fun and intensity, and of course an overall score out of 10, at least in my personal thoughts. When it comes to ski slope rating, I'm actually having a really hard time of giving this a black diamond or a double black diamond. This thing is intense. And while the height requirement is only 48 inches, so some smaller riders can actually get on this bad boy, it is a little too intense for most of them, I'm sure. I would definitely say this is one of the more intense coasters at the park, and I would 100% argue that you should ride things like Shikra, Kumba, and even Montu before potentially taking on Iron Gwazi. And for sure, I would definitely ride Cheetah Hunt or Cobra's Curse before even attempting to go to that side of the park. I feel like the rest of Busch Gardens Tampa has a lot of looping coasters with a lot of positive G-forces, and people can get pretty used to that, and it feels like a lot of the locals have. But with Iron Gwazi, there's a lot of airtime, and a lot of people might not be too used to that. So I would definitely keep that in mind. This thing is one of the more intense coasters at the park, even though the park is already stacked with intensity. So moving on to that 5-star rating for intensity, I'm going to struggle between saying 4 and 5 stars. I'll be honest, most of the coasters at the park I would put around a 4-star rating, but this thing is kind of leaning towards 5 at this point, which is seldom seen. The only other 5-star intensity rides that I can think of that I've ridden are things like X2 or Maverick at Cedar Point, and Iron Gwazi is almost there. Not quite, but it is pretty dang close. In terms of fun though, this is easily a 5-star rating. Oh my gosh, this thing is so much fun, especially when you're used to riding some more intense and airtime filled rides. I mean, you heard me, I could not stop smiling and laughing the entire ride duration. Even going up the lift hill was a heck of a lot of fun because of that awesome view as well as knowing what I was in for. Okay, this moves us to my personal rating out of 10. I think you know where we're going with this. This is easily a 10 out of 10. This is as perfect a roller coaster as I can think of, at least that I've been able to get on out of my like 160 or so now. But holy crap, Iron Gwazi really knocked my socks off time and time again. This is a ride I highly recommend if you are a thrill seeker of any kind. Definitely get down to Florida. They have a fantastic lineup of rides at Busch Gardens Tampa, as well as in the entire state. Over in Orlando, it's only about an hour and a half away. That is a trip that I think everybody should be taking, thrill seeker or not at this point. And Busch Gardens Tampa has to be a stop on that trip. Well, I guess it's time to ask the question, have you ridden Iron Gwazi? What are your thoughts on this crazy RMC coaster? Do you love it? Do you only like it? Let me know down in the comments below. And of course, while you're down there, make sure to check the description for all those links, whether it's my Instagram, my TikTok, or the Discord server. Make sure to have a little gander down there. And of course, if you'd like to support the channel even more than commenting, liking, subscribing, subscribing or just watching videos, we do have Parks Bros pins still available if you'd like to purchase one of those. But with all that said, I wanted to say thank you so incredibly much for watching this review of Iron Gwazi. I really do appreciate it. Make sure to stay tuned for more reviews in the future. We'll have a review on Icebreaker and plenty of Busch Gardens Tampa attractions fairly soon. But until then, we'll see you on the next ride.